Let's do this. Let me see.
Hi, everyone. This is John Ward. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to introduce my guest today in just a moment. I wanted to notate the date, which is November 9th, 2020. And today I'm going to be talking with Kevin Nichols. He's the managing director of Penumbra Solutions, a life settlement funds company. And so thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Good morning, John. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. So, you don't know that much about what I do, but I do something called infinite banking, which is really life insurance, and utilizing that to create their own bank. And
sure, very familiar with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many people that run out of space to fund a life insurance policy in the ways that I work with them. They have other cash. They don't really like having it in the market. They're getting closer to retirement, or at least they're thinking about retirement. And they're saying, I don't know what's going to happen with this market. And they're wise to look at some options. And
Right.
I was introduced to you a number of months ago, and have referred some people to you. I believe you've helped some. But they're looking for a safe place. And so, I introduced you as the managing director of a life settlement funds company. Can you tell people, first of all, what life settlement investing is about, and maybe how you got involved with it?
Sure. Well, life settlement is simply the purchase of a life insurance policy from an elderly person who no longer needs it, wants it, can afford it, for whatever reason. They don't need, generally, most of our clients that we settle are in their, I would say, 88 to 93-year-old range, very, very old. As you might imagine, premiums on a policy for an insured that age are quite heavy, and they don't have any cash value, or if they do, it's very, very limited. And so they come to us and say, are you interested in buying it? And we'll evaluate the policy. We'll evaluate a number of things: strength of the company, age of the policy, premium obligation, premium to death benefit ratios. And then based upon that and their age, we'll make an offer on the policy. Sometimes they like to retain a little bit of the death benefit, so that there are some final expenses there, because a lot of these people, if they were to sell this policy, they have no coverage left. And so we like to, if they want to keep a couple $100,000 or whatever it might be, we're certainly open to negotiate that if that's what they need. And then we would then make the premium payments, and when the insured passes, we collect the death benefit. It's really a very simple investment. We only deal with American A- or better rated companies. And since 1845, there's been no American B+ or better rated company that's ever failed to pay a death benefit. We typically look at universal life policies. We're not really interested in whole life policies for a very specific reason. They're designed to build cash. We like whole life policies personally for ourselves, for much the same reason that you're probably offering them to your clients. Jim and I each own several policies. And Jim is my business partner, by the way. But the majority are universal life policies. Some of them start out as term life policies, and they have with what we call a convertibility rider or feature, where they are the insured is able to convert it from a term life policy to a universal life policy, and all they have to do, they don't have to re-qualify medically. They just have to agree to make the higher premium payments, and it turns into a universal life policy. Now, the benefit, of course, of the universal life policy is that, well, let's look at the detriment of a term policy. It lies in its name. There's a term. It's going to term out in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years at a specific age. And then you can no longer renew it. And that for us is not something we're interested in. We want to make sure that this policy will continue on to X age and continue to be renewable. And so now, when you convert a policy from a term life to a universal life, the premiums go up sometimes exponentially, but we know what they are. And so we know how to calculate whether or not the policy is viable for us. And what we do is we put together pools of investors so that we can buy more policies. And right now, we've been doing this about 10 years. We are on our 10th fund. Our first fund, back in our first funds, we used to do what were called fractions. We would purchase fractions of policies because that's all we could do. And the yield to us and to our investors was probably 8 to 10%. We were happy with that. But then as we got on in this, we ultimately became able to purchase entire policies ourselves. And that's what we do now. That's all we do is purchase entire policies. And now the yield is, well, let me say that we state that the yield is 10 to 12% annualized net of fees. And I can talk about fees in a second, very, very low. But quite frankly, if that's all these policies yielded, we'd be very disappointed. And I can show you how that works here in a second if you'd like to know. But
are you talking compounded, Kevin? Are you talking?
Yeah, internal rate. We use an internal rate of return calculation, and as far as we're concerned, that's really the only accurate way to evaluate an investment like this, because an internal rate of return calculation takes into account the timing of the cash flows. So that when someone invests $100,000, that's a negative cash flow to them. And then when they start to get money back, those are positive cash flows. And there's a formula, of course, to calculate the exact rate of return, internal rate of return, based upon not only the cash flows that you get, but when you get them. So we're very conservative, and I would say that probably the majority of our funds are going to be somewhere in the range of 15 to 17 or 19%. Once everything is all in and done, every single penny that is invested is guaranteed by an American A or better rated life insurance company. We never touch the client's money. We never even have access to it. We've never had a policy that we've purchased, which right now is well over 1,800 policies. We've never had a policy pay less than what we anticipated. We've never had an investor lose a penny. It's just worked out perfectly. Any investor who has, whether it's cash or IRA money or rollover 401k money, what have you, all of that is acceptable into a life settlement fund.
Yeah. Have you in 2020s, and since the pandemic started, and some of the changes to access to qualified money, 401k, IRA, have you seen an uptick in interest?
We've seen an uptick in interest because the market has become more unpredictable or has declined for many investors. We're not correlated to the market at all, and so anytime there's a downtick in market-based investments, alternative investments that are not correlated generally see an increase in business. Our last fund, which was Fund 9, we actually had to close it probably 3 months late because we just had a rush of investors and a rush of advisors saying, hey, I've got a bunch of clients that are interested in getting out of the market and want to look at your fund. And so we held it open for a little longer. But generally the funds we open a fund and generally we close it 9 months later. That's typical. Sometimes it goes 11 months, but generally what we're looking at is about 9 months.
When you looked at getting into this industry, was it driven partly from your own need for a good, solid, rock solid investment, but also clients, contacts, and what they were experiencing in the market and other places,
Sure.
Real estate and so forth?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
This investment, we actually invested individually, my partner and I, in fractions of life insurance policy. And a fraction is where you may invest $15,000 to own a piece of a policy with 50 other investors. and we had been investing them in them for quite some time. We each owned several of them, several fractions of policies. And we were actually on the golf course, and this is a true story. And we were playing golf, and we both got a text. And he got a text that said, "Hey, congratulations, you've had a policy that has matured, and here's your share of the maturity. We're going to be depositing this in your account." And I got a text that said, "Hey, this policy has gone long. People are living longer, and so we need you to pay your share of the premium cost coming up." So it's called a premium call, and it's normal in this business. However, we've never had one for any of our clients. They've never experienced a premium call because of the way we manage the fund. So I said, "Man, wouldn't it be wouldn't it be better if we could just combine all of our policies into a single pool? That way, when one of us got a payment, we both win. And when one of us had to make a premium call, we both share in the burden." And so we thought, you know what, that's a good idea. And as we continued to play, I said, I bet my dad would be interested in this as well. And so we started looking into, could we do this? And we had a lot of opinions from a lot of people. And long story short, 18 months later, we opened our first fund, and we opened it to ourselves, our own personal planning clients, our family members. And then it quickly became something that everybody wanted. Nobody wanted to buy fractions any longer. And furthermore, we had advisors who were coming to us saying, "Can I send my clients to you and have them invest?" And so it became very evident very soon that we would no longer be doing any financial planning. We would simply be managing these funds because you don't want to conflict it. If you have an advisor who sends you business and they're concerned that maybe you're going to take their client, that's not going to be very fruitful for either of us. So
Right.
we just got out of the financial planning business altogether. After about the middle of Fund 2, we made that decision and stopped doing that altogether. And the funds have just grown since then. We're on Fund 10 right now. All of the money is handled by a third-party custodian, Bank of Utah. We pay them to do this, to handle all the money. We use several self-directed IRA custodians. Bank of Utah would be one. Vantage IRA Services as another. As long as you have a self-directed IRA custodian, if you're investing through an IRA, it doesn't really matter to us who it is. You can use your own, as long as they'll agree to put our investment on their platform so that you can invest, which means they're going to do some due diligence on us, and that's fine. We're fully accustomed to that. We've been exposed to that for several years. But if you've got rollover 401k, we have a lot of people who have self-directed 401ks. And it's very easy for them. They simply just write a check from the 401k plan. But a lot of professionals, doctors, dentists, anesthesiologists, attorneys, anybody who's got, actually a lot of accountants, anybody who has a self-directed 401k, this is a perfect investment for. If you've got family trusts, we have 2 family trusts that are well known, and their family invests every year in the same, in separate funds moving forward.
So let me
Sure.
interrupt you for a second, Kevin. So are you saying that they're obviously, self-employed, they have their own 401k, but those that are, have a 401k and then leave their job, they have a rollover that's
Right.
eligible for rollover, they roll it over typically into a self-directed IRA at that point, just so that they don't have to pay the taxes, they're not distributing their 401k at that point, right?
That's
They put it
exactly.
into self-directed and then they
Exactly.
invest in the fund.
Exactly correct. So if you leave a job, say you've been at a company for many years and you've got a nice 401k there, and you're moving on to another company, and they offer a new 401k. You have several options. One, you can roll your 401k into their 401k, and that money it's still tax deferred. There is no tax taxable event
Right.
there.
Sure.
But that money is eligible for you to then pull it out if you want without penalty. They can't control that. What most people do is they simply roll it into an IRA. If they decide that they're going to go and invest through Fidelity, they'll roll it into a Fidelity IRA and invest in one of Fidelity's products. Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Ameriprise, all of them do the same thing. If you decide that you want to go into an alternative investment or an alternative asset fund, such as life settlements, oil and gas, real estate, commercial notes, what have you, then you're going to need to put that into a self-directed IRA, because Schwab, Fidelity, all those other main companies that I described, they aren't going to allow you through their IRA to invest in an alternative asset, for the simple reason that they don't offer them. They can't offer them, and so they won't recommend them. Even though we've never had anybody lose money, we've never had anybody. They do it if they could, but they can't, so they don't. Very simple. So you have to open a self-directed IRA for that portion of your money that you want to move into a self-directed asset. IRAs can invest in a number of things. I mean, you can invest in physical gold, you can invest in gold notes, you can invest in, I believe you can still invest in art, but you can invest in a number of things. And the limits are laid out very specifically from the IRS. You cannot invest directly in life insurance, which we get that question all the time. Can I invest in your investment through my self-directed IRA, even though it's life insurance? And the answer is yes, you can. And the reason that you can is, first of all, what we do is a security. We own pieces of policies, or we own whole policies, mostly whole policies. But when somebody settles a life insurance policy, when they sell it, as you know, and as your clients know, life insurance enjoys this golden goose status in that when it pays off to the beneficiary tax-free. However, when someone sells that policy to us, that golden goose status goes away. We no longer have that. Now, I have heard of people out there stating that they still do have it. That is not a battle I would wish to fight with the IRS. And so we choose not to. We just take the conservative route and say, no, it's taxable, and we'll treat it as such. But the reason that the IRS will not allow you to invest directly in, well, for example, in whole life insurance is very simple, and it makes sense. If your money goes in tax deferred, and you are allowed to invest it in a whole life insurance from which you can borrow against your cash value, tax-free, then truly you could get your money back and never have paid a single penny in tax. That's not in the IRS's best interest, and it makes sense. It's logical. So, that's why that is set up, so that you cannot invest directly into life insurance policies. We've never had that problem because what we have is a security, and we pay, and the money is taxed. So it's not an issue at all whatsoever. This is a perfect vehicle for someone who's considering converting to a Roth. Excuse me.
Yeah, I wanted to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because if you have an IRA, well, say for example, you've never been able to contribute to a Roth IRA because you made too much money. You can say you roll over your 401k into an IRA. That IRA can be converted to a Roth IRA. All you have to do is claim the amount that you're converting. Say you're going to convert $100,000 into a Roth IRA. You simply claim that as income and declare it on your tax form for this year, say for 2021. You claim that conversion, and you're going to claim that $100,000 of income. Now that's going to be taxed at the highest rate, because the tax rate, of course, the tax tables are progressive, and this is last dollar in, so it's going to be taxed at the highest rate. And then you pay the tax on that, and then any growth from there on forever is completely tax-free. And I can show where that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're able to save on the money that the tax that you pay. And especially given the fact that we know one thing about our funds is what we're doing is we're buying our growth in advance at a discount. We know what it's going to be worth down the road. What we don't know is when. And that's a beautiful thing. So typically in one of our funds, on average, $100,000 investment, when we say we raise $10,000, John, we're going to deploy that capital into the market and we're going to purchase in the range of say $30 to $35 million of death benefit. So say we get $35 million, that's roughly 3.5 times our investment. So if a $100,000 investor invests, he's going to get 3.5 times his investment. So roughly 350,000. So if your investors, if I said to them, okay, you're going to invest your money, it's going to go into a fund and every penny is invested in American A or better rated life insurance companies. And we never touch the money. It's always, we never even have access to it. It's always handled by an FDIC insured institution. And at the end, in say 8 years, you're going to get back $350,000. Are you happy? And the answer is unequivocally, absolutely. I'm thrilled. Okay. What if I started to give you back some of your money in year 4 or 5? Are you even happier? Absolutely. Well, that's exactly what we do. And that's what we do every day. When we have say we have a $10 million raise, and like I said, we procure or we buy $35 million in death benefit, then one of the things that's important here is in that $10 million raise, we're not spending all 10 million. We are only spending probably 6 million to get that $35 million in death benefit. And that's something we do every day. The other 4 million is held at Bank of Utah in our premium reserve account. And that's used to make premium payments for the first 2 to 2.5 years. Now, when people ask me, when am I going to start getting paid on my investment? I see growth. Okay, I see that we've had policies mature. When am I going to start getting distributions? I tell them there will be policies that mature in the first year. Every single fund has had policies that mature in the first year. We've had a few policies that matured within 3 months, which is phenomenal. No, I'm sorry, 3 weeks, which is unbelievable. But what we tell people is this: look, don't expect anything for the first 4 years. You'll see that there's growth, and you'll see that that money is at Bank of Utah, and it's your money. Okay, but rather than giving it to you and then having to come and say, Mrs. Smith, we need you to spend $1,500 this year in a premium as a premium call, wouldn't you rather just us handle it, leave it here? And that's what we do. That way we don't have to chase money. And so when I said that we don't have premium calls, we've never in 10 years of doing this had to have a premium call from investors, not once. We don't like premium calls. What that means is we essentially says that we mismanaged. We didn't do it right. We bought too many policies. We didn't reserve enough. And furthermore, since my partner and I are investors in this, as is my dad, although he's not a principal at all, I don't like premium calls, because if I have to do it with your clients, then I have to make the same premium obligation.
Call your dad.
Exactly. And that's not a phone
the same
call.
out of pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how we manage it, is so that the client, the investors don't have to ever see that. It creates other problems too. If you invest through an IRA and you no longer have the ability to contribute to an IRA, and I say you're going to have a premium call and you can't contribute to an IRA, now I've got to set up a side cash account for you. And it just makes it's just a whole lot of work that could be avoided if we just set the expectations and said, look, you're not going to get any money back for probably 4 to 5 years. It's all going to be here. You're able to see it at Bank of Utah, but it's there in case we need it for premiums. Once we get to about year 4 or 5, we've kind of reached that tipping point where we no longer need as much, and we distribute everything on a quarterly basis directly to the investors.
Very good. You know, one of the things that I thought of while you were speaking was so many clients that I talk to, and that they have 401ks from previous companies, previous employers. They don't know where else to put it, so they just kind of leave it there. They don't turn it into a self-directed. They don't roll it over. Right. They don't do anything. And this is obviously an option for them that they weren't even aware of. But I did want to talk a little bit about you know, this being new to some people that are listening right now. They're saying, why haven't I heard of this? You know, who's doing this? Well, you know, who's your typical investor? What is their profile? but I also wanted to talk a little bit about the big institutional investors in this space, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And they've been doing this for quite some time. And
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about that?
I sure can.
Great.
First of all, the reason most people haven't heard about this is because it's not in the mainstream. And a lot of entities don't want it in the mainstream. The life settlement industry, well, let's back up. Roughly 90 to 95% of all life insurance policies lapse. That's a very high rate.
Mhm.
Furthermore, most of them lapse inside of 7 years. So let's think about that for a second. If I issued a life insurance, if I was a company and I issue a policy and I only had to pay out on 5% of those policies because I knew statistically, and if insurance companies are good at anything, they are good at statistics, probably the best in the world.
I totally agree.
They are.
Best risk takers of all time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you knew that, okay, going in, that explains a lot of the reason that insurance companies are really the strongest financial institutions in the world. In fact, the mutual companies are probably the strongest companies in the world. Now, given that fact, the insurance companies would rather that there not be a life settlement industry. Makes sense. They'd rather you make the payments for 5 to 7 years and then you went away and they owe you nothing. So all we're doing is holding their feet to the fire.
Mm.
You issued this policy, and now the individual has sold it. Okay, it's personal property. Now, when did this come about? Well, back in 1911, there was a case known as Grigsby versus Russell, where a physician agreed to take a life insurance policy as settlement for a surgery that he was going to perform because the patient didn't have any money. So he accepted the insurance policy. And a couple of years later, the patient died, and the surgeon went to try and collect on the policy, and the insurance company denied it and said, no, you don't have any insurable interest. Okay, well, this went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the case is known as Grigsby versus Russell, and I believe it's in 1913. And the surgeon prevailed, and the opinion was written by none other than Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. And he said, once a policy is issued and once it has gone past the contestability period, they own it. You can't deny the claim. Furthermore, it is personal property of the insured. They're welcome to sell it or do anything they want with it. And that
To the highest bidder.
absolutely. And that opinion has stood the test of time. It has been challenged and it remains the law of the land. Now, who invests in life insurance or in these life settlements?
Hmm.
Buffett invests in life settlements. Bill Gates invests in life settlements. Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, has hundreds of billions of dollars in these policies. Deutsche Bank, Merrill Lynch used to do it. Credit Suisse, all were huge players and are huge players in the life settlement industry. Now, who's the largest player today, purchaser of policies of other life insurance companies? Believe it or not, it's AIG. They are enormous participants in this industry, and they don't do it under their own name because that would probably not be good publicity that they were out buying the policies from other companies. But they have a company that does it for them, that is theirs, and they are enormous players in this industry. They are the biggest, in fact. So
Is that a tier 1 asset for these folks?
for them, I don't know. I don't know how they claim it. It's not owned by the company itself. It's owned by a subsidiary of the company. Right. So I don't know if they have to kind of categorize it differently because of that. So I'm not aware, but
obviously a rock solid investment. That's why.
Obviously, well, I mean, when you've got this kind of history, I mean, Again, since 1845, which by the way, is as long as we've been keeping track, no B plus or better rated company has ever failed to pay on a life insurance death benefit or an annuity.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for it. If you think about it, you may ask, well, why? Gosh, that's an enormous, that's a huge statistic.
Success rate.
Yeah, it is. Every state has an insurance commissioner, and every insurance commissioner determines who's allowed to essentially play in his ball field. And so say you had 10 companies at a big round table in the state, we're say Texas, which is where we're at here. We had 10 companies around the table, and say a company comes up and says, I'm illiquid. I'm not going to be able to meet my obligations. What happens? Well, what happens is the insurance company says, or the insurance commissioner says, okay, then we're going to take your obligations and we're going to say, does any of you other 9 want to buy it? Now, remember, 90 to 95% of these are going to cancel. They're going to lapse.
Right.
So most of the time, what happens is a company steps up and says, yeah, I'll take them. It's like if you were in Vegas and a casino was going out of business and all they had was slot machines, and you knew that 90 to 95% of the slot machines were going to pay. Would you buy it? The answer is absolutely. But say nobody.
Just give me the chance.
Absolutely. So say nobody steps up and says, yeah, I'll take it. Then what happens is the insurance commissioner contractually has the authority to say, okay, then I'm going to split it up amongst you, period. And you're all going to take it. So even though each state has a legal reserve fund,
right, in
the event that a life insurance company becomes insolvent and nobody takes it, there is a legal reserve fund, much like the FDIC, which insures bank deposits. Now, ask yourself in the last 20 years, how many times has the FDIC, has that insurance been taxed? How many times has it been used? And the answer is hundreds and hundreds of times. Now ask yourself this: how many times has the legal reserve system been used for life insurance companies? And the answer is, wait for it, 0, none, never been used. Why? Because these are much stronger companies than our financial institutions.
Right. It's quite a track record.
It is quite a track record. That's why we're not concerned about whether or not our retirement is safe. It is. And people ask, we have a lot of investors who will put a lot of money into our funds and a high percentage of their net worth. And frequently I'll get asked, how much should I be looking at? And I will say, you can't look at this like a typical investment. In other words, the laws of diversification go out the window here, because everything has a guarantee. So, what I'll tell them is this: look, it's not for all your money. It's only for that money that you can't afford to lose. And
right.
You have to think about that. Well, I can't afford to lose any of it. I'm 62.
Right.
Look, here's the key. And what's the downside to this investment? I'll tell you right up front. The downside of this investment is liquidity. If what we used to tell people is this: if you know for certain that you're going to need this money inside the next 10 years. Now, most funds are going to pay out within 8, but let's say 10, I'm going to need this money. Don't invest it here. There are lots of other opportunities. And I'm sure you've got other opportunities for them as well. But if you know that you've got enough to get you through 10 years, and you need to look at your Social Security income, any pension income, and what other annuity income or money that you're borrowing against your life, your whole life policies. Once you look at that and you say, okay, I've got enough to go 10 years, the rest of it, consider it, look at it. This could handle a big portion of it. And given that every single dime is guaranteed by an American insurance company, I don't lose any sleep at night worried about my retirement at all. And, I'm 61 years old. My wife and I just celebrated 34 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's good work. That's really good work.
I would say it's tough, but the truth is, it was probably tough on her. She deserves a medal.
Usually is.
It usually is. But, we're just regular people like everybody else. I've been married 34 years. My partner's been, I think, married 32 years. They've got 4 kids. We've got 3. We live right here in the area. We're not fly by night.
Sure.
We're just looking to help people make money. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, and have some certainty around it, right? Contractual certainty.
Absolutely. Like I
I
said,
wanted to talk,
yeah,
not get into, all the nuts and bolts of it, but it's a subject that comes to mind all the time with people when they're looking at their investments in the stock market, because we always hear about average rate of returns, and we know that the real world doesn't work in averages.
right.
It makes a difference when these ups and downs and volatility in the market happen. But what most people don't realize is that the fees, even if fees have come down over
Hmm.
time, uh, for various stock market investments, we know that that cuts into that compounding over time. So when
Right.
you've talked about, conservatively 10 to 12%, you're
Hmm.
talking net, and
Net.
you're talking net of fees, and you've talked about potentially expecting higher returns than that, and those were net of fees too, right?
Yes. Yes.
So when we look at the stock market, and if someone wants to say, historically that the S&P has been, 8% or 10% or whatever, you hear all kinds of different numbers. We know there's real numbers out there, but those are averages. Again, when we know the truth about averages,
Right.
you have $100,000, it goes up 50%. Hey, you're at 150,000, goes down 50%. The next year, we know we're at 75,000. We
Right.
know that the average was zero, but in fact, you actually lost over those 2 years, right?
Exactly.
So
Right.
that's obvious, but that's a big deal that you're talking about 10 to 12 conservatively net of fees.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad you used the average example. That's something that we used to use. Warren Buffett has a saying, rule number one, never lose money.
Mm.
Never. Rule number two, see rule number one. The bottom line is when you lose money, everything changes. This investment, look, our fee structure is as low as we can possibly make it. We've actually been criticized by other fund managers for what they call leaving too much on the table.
Mm.
It takes money to set up these funds. We have to pay for the legal, the accounting, the custodian work, the printing, what have you. And so we have what's called an O&O, or organizational and offering fee. And that's 1.5% of whatever your client invests. So if they put $100,000 in, 98.5 goes into the fund. The other 1,500 comes to reimburse us for setting up the fund. Now, our management fee, which is on the back end, is 2.5% of the death benefit. So when they get paid, we get paid. So if you said the average length of a fund is going to be 4 years, and you have 1.5% up front, 2.5 on the back, that's 4% over 8 years, 0.5% a year. I think that's pretty reasonable. A lot of considering that we don't ever touch the money, we can't borrow the money, we can't anything.
Right.
Now, if you have someone who has a self-directed IRA, they're going to have to pay the self-directed IRA custodian every year, and that sometimes is $150 to $250. Excuse me. And they're not accustomed to that because Schwab, Fidelity, Ameritrade, whomever, they bury the fees on a quarterly basis in your statement. If you went back and I had a client who had $100,000, and I'm not going to give you the name of the company, but in one of those market-based IRAs, and they said, I don't pay any fees. And I said, send me your statement. And they did. And he was paying almost $3,000 a year and had been for years. And I said, it's right here in front of you. You just never saw it. And you're complaining about having to pay $250 a year. And the reason that the IRA custodians, or that the self-directed custodians, have to charge you something is because they don't get a piece of your investment, where the other companies do.
Yeah, they can't hide it somewhere. Right?
Exactly. So, but there are no other recurring fees from us, none. We don't have an ongoing management fee. We don't have, there's nothing else. Most funds are in what we call the 5 and 20 base range. They're going to take 5% of whatever you invest up front as fees. Furthermore, they're going to take 20% of the growth on the back end. Now, while they can get away with that, more power to them. I don't agree with it. We have a saying in this business, and that is that pigs get fed, but hogs get slaughtered, and I do not want to get slaughtered. So we can make a nice living doing it this way, and we don't have any problem attracting new investors. And I can live with myself. We live very nicely. I'm confident in what we do. We do it the right way for the right reasons, and it's priced as low as we can afford to do. We actually lowered our prices in Fund 5. We were prior to being with Bank of Utah. We were at Provident Trust, with whom we had negotiated an ongoing multi-year deal whereby the upfront fees would be 1.75% of whatever was invested, and that was for organizational and offering fees. We left them in Fund 5. I'm not going to say why, but we had very good reason. And we negotiated a deal with Bank of Utah that was better. And so what we did was, we could have pocketed that extra quarter point, but we didn't. We lowered it. We lowered our upfront fees from 1 3/4 to 1.5, and we remained at 2.5 on the back end. So, we've kept our fees as low as possible, literally just enough to make the fund work.
Because you're an investor. I mean,
absolutely, I'm an investor. We'd rather get an extra 0.5 point to point for our investors than pick up that nominal amount, because you have to continue to go back and raise money for every new fund. So I had an advisor send me a prospectus from this is true. I had an advisor send me a prospectus from a potential investment 3 weeks ago. He sent it to me and he said, I want you to look at this and tell me what you think. He goes, I don't really know enough to know what to look for. And I happened to be going away for the weekend, and I said, I'll get back to you on Monday. And so I called him right on Monday and I said, okay, we need to have a long conversation about this. Okay. First of all, the money's not protected. It is investing. You're investing in his company. His company already owns these policies. You're investing in his company. Number one. Number two, the yield he's claiming, he's saying about 8%, which is, in my opinion, after looking at his numbers, I don't know how he's even going to get that. But here's the most important point. Fully 23% of every dollar coming into the fund was going into his pocket. Man, that's just
wrong.
It's wrong. It's robbery. It's wrong. I don't agree with it at all. So those kind of things are out there. You have to take the time to know who you're dealing with, read the prospectus, read the memorandum, and do the math, quite frankly.
Who qualifies to invest in life settlements?
Well, technically, our funds are designed for accredited investors. Now, we can take up to 35 non-accredited investors, and we will. The main thing that we look for is this the right investment for your client? I don't know that we technically have a fiduciary relationship with your clients, but we treat it as though we do. Is it the right investment? Are you going to need it before it's available? Is it the right percentage of your total asset pool? So we're looking for the investor who is, if not accredited, they are A, knowledgeable, and B, it is suitable. That's really most important. I would say business owners, physicians, professionals, physicians, doctors, dentists, opticians, attorneys, family trust money, but business owners or anybody who's got a rollover 401k, and you're in your 40s or 50s, and you're not going to retire to 70 or 65, whatever. It's perfect for that. Absolutely perfect. We have clients who invest in every single fund all the way along, creating somewhat of a laddering effect. That's fine. It just depends on what their financial condition is.
Sure. So the reason I'm going to ask this question is because what happens with some of my clients when I'm talking to them about how much of a policy should they create, which is really a place to put their cash,
Mhm.
right? Not
Right.
just about the life insurance. In fact, that might not even be the reason they came to me. Most likely it's not the reason. They wanted to create their own bank.
Mhm.
But as they pull money out, and they dig a hole basically to be refilled with the money that they took out. They also think, well, how could I possibly put that much money into a policy? I mean, how am I going to continue to make those payments? And I have a whole discussion with them about that. But when I look at someone who invests in life settlement funds with you, Penumbra, they're looking at some flow maybe coming 4 to 5 years into the process.
Right.
But it could go as long as 10 years.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing somewhere in that 6, 7, 8, there's bigger chunks of cash coming in of cash flow. So it starts smaller, gets bigger
Yes.
in the middle, and then at the end it peters out a bit, right?
Yeah.
And then it all averages out. They've got to find a place to put this cash, and a lot of people don't want to put it in the bank. You know,
Oh, you mean as
people,
it comes back to them?
as it comes back to them. Now
Right.
they've got this money. Where do I put it?
Right.
Now I've got more money. I mean, they could invest in another fund if you've created another fund. So
Mhm.
they
Sure.
can roll it right over, or they could put it into one of these policies that has enough of a hole for them to
Right.
fill, right?
Absolutely, they could.
Yeah. So that is the flow of the cash, right? Is
Yes.
it starts out slow, gets bigger in the middle, and they're going to literally, when they start to break out these numbers that you're talking about, even on a conservative basis,
Yes.
they end up with some big chunks of cash.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bell curve. You start off very slow, and then it
Yeah. Thank you for that.
ramps up. I would say it's not a parabola. It's not exactly the same on either side of the center, but it's very similar to a bell curve. When you get to the end, you've only got every time we have maturities, it's a portion of it is return of principal to the investor, and a portion of it is growth. That's usually treated as income. Now,
The growth part is considered income, or the
Yeah.
return premium is considered?
no, return of principal is there's no taxable event there, but the growth part is considered income.
Gotcha.
There used to be a way it was considered long-term capital gains, but the IRS took that away, so we don't fight that.
Okay.
A portion of it will be long-term capital gains, but I'm not going to go into how that works and why. But consider that it's going to be income, and if it's going into an IRA, or then that's fine, because that's what you're expecting anyway. Of course, if it's a Roth IRA, then there's no taxable event there whatsoever. But so investor invests, and as they're getting money back to them, say after year 5 or 4 or 5, a portion of that is principal and a portion is growth. Now, if you get to year 8 and there are a couple policies left, and you've already gotten, say for example, you expected to, you put in $100,000 and they expect to get, say, $300,000 back. And by the time we get to year 8, they've gotten 250,000, of their expected 300. Now we're just waiting, we're waiting on the last 2 outliers. We may sell those policies. We may hold on to those policies. At that point, you're playing with house money. It's like,
Right.
that's free money. So do what you want with your money. When we make distributions, when the money comes back into an investor's account, whether it's their bank account or their IRA or what have you, we can't pull it back again to reinvest. It doesn't work that way. Once it's in their account, it's gone from us. It's theirs. So,
Right.
what they do with it is their business.
Yeah. Good clarification. Any other parting thoughts here? I really appreciate this conversation. This is great.
No, it's been
Great
good. I
knowledge.
mean, we've had a good relationship with you. Several of your clients have taken advantage of it, and we always appreciate the referral. If a client is interested, have them watch our video.
Okay.
Video is at www.thepενumbraplan.com. Penumbra spelled P-E-N as in Nancy, U-M as in Mary, B-R-A, penumbraplan.com. And tell them I'll buy them lunch if they can tell me what penumbra is without looking it up.
Okay,
No,
I'll let them.
but you know,
You
have them
just,
look
you
at,
just did let them know.
I think I did, yeah. They have them look at that and then give us a call. Our number is all over that site. If they want to call directly, if they've got some information already, they're interested. Our phone number here is area code 817-479-9770. They can reach me directly at kevin@penumbrasolutions.com. Just be sure and for them to reference seeing you, because here's the thing. We only deal through agents who refer business. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, you know, I found you on Google. Well, we're not really there. We found you on YouTube. No, you didn't, because we're not there. This is not available to the general public. It's not available. We do not do any general solicitation at all. We are prohibited from doing that. So if you heard of us, you heard of us through an advisor, and I want to know who it is. It doesn't cost them any more, but they should certainly let us know who they heard about us from. So,
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
you know, we can have a conversation. We'll send them information, whatever they want to know.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kevin Nichols of Penumbra Solutions, and hope to talk to you again sometime in the future.
Thank you, John. I look forward to it as well. Enjoy your
All
day.
right. Enjoy your week. Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.
We off? Very good.